Hello, I'm Mike Hackard. I'm the chair of Hackard Law, a law firm focusing on estate, trust, and elder financial abuse litigation in California's major urban areas. This is Hackard Law's podcast. It starts here. This is an August 2017 podcast featuring Jim Carden, one of California's most respected computer forensics experts in both civil and criminal matters. We're going to discuss the use of computer forensics in identifying and prosecuting wrongdoing. Jim is very well qualified to speak to this. So, Jim, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, sure glad that you're here, that you have such interesting things to say. And now let's start with what's your background? Where were you born?
Born and raised here in California. Actually, Southern California to start out with, but went to high school up here in the Northern California area until I left at 18 or 19 for the military.
Okay, and where'd you go in the military?
Joined the Air Force, became a pararescueman, specializing in the bringing home of downed pilots and other people stranded behind enemy lines. Did that for about 15 years, then transferred into their investigative branch with the Office of Special Investigations.
Wow. So tell us, what's the Office of Special Investigations? What's that all about?
Well, it's the Air Force's investigative body, very similar to the FBI. In fact, the history of the OSI came from the FBI back in the 40s when there was a fraud investigation concerning very high-ranking military officials. Therefore, they felt that they had to bring in the FBI to do the investigation. After that successful investigation, that made the Air Force want to have an investigative arm of its own to do these type of investigations, and therefore the Office of Special Investigations was born.
Okay, and what kind of training did that involve?
It's a standard training for all special agents in the federal government. You start off going through the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia, and you get trained in law enforcement and investigations.
Okay. And how many years did you do that?
I've been doing law enforcement since 2000.
Okay. And so after you left the Air Force, where did you go?
After I left the Air Force, I went to the police department and started working as a police officer here in a Bay Area city.
Okay. And did you start off in patrol? And
Yeah, pretty much similar to just every other police officer out there. After the academy and the FTO program, I worked the streets for about 5 or 6 years before I felt comfortable enough to start testing for specialty positions.
Yeah, and I know that you became a detective.
Correct.
Okay, and then as you became a detective, you increased certain specialties that you got training in, I guess. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I started out in financial crimes and did a lot of financial elder abuse cases as well. And with the financial crimes, of course, computers are involved. And when we started seeing the amounts of computers coming into even the lower level types of financial crimes, the street level crimes, the identity theft, the check frauds, and stuff like that, the suspects were using computers to conduct their criminal acts. I was seizing computers, but I was not allowed as a detective to look at the computers, which seems silly, right?
Yeah.
So I would seize these computers. I'd do a search warrant to their homes or wherever they're operating, seize all the evidence, seize the computers. Every time I seized the computers, the people pled out and pled guilty immediately. They did not want to go to court. They did not want to fight the charges because normally it was a single victim charge in a single act. This, of course, bothered me, so I went to my sergeant, my lieutenant, and I requested that we do something so we can look at the computer evidence. There's a lot of laws that safeguard digital evidence and the way you have to handle them and the way you have to, analyze with the standard tools and processes used. So it takes a lot of specialized training to do so. And without no one in our department ever been through that training, our hands were tied as an agency and we just could not look at the computers.
So did you go get training in that?
Well, they agreed with me and sent me off to the Department of Justice to go through computer forensic training. And I'll say, once I got back from that training, and I started looking at those computers, the amount of evidence that we found, the single crime, single victim cases easily grew to dozens of victims in dozens of counts, and so it was
Wow.
well worth the time and the effort going to that training.
Well, I know you've been involved in a lot of noteworthy cases, but you were telling me one about an elder financial abuse case. Uh, can you share that with our audience?
Yes, I can. That's actually one of my favorite cases that I worked. As a detective, we sit back in our offices and we get all the reports taken by patrol the night before. And I was going through the financial crime reports, and one caught my eye because it wasn't a crime report. It was an information report, and that was unusual because most of our officers all just take crime reports. But this one was about a elderly woman that felt that she had been scammed. Didn't really know what to do about it, so she called the police. The police showed up. But the patrol officer, this is not a usual area of criminal activity for a patrolman. So he didn't know what to call it, but he knew something was wrong. Something in his gut told him there's something here, even though I don't understand it. So he decided, instead of not taking a report, which happens a lot because they say, well, this is civil, call a civil attorney and use those remedies. He decided to take an information report. And so when I read that report, being more trained in financial crimes and investigations of those crimes, I immediately recognized several felony crimes, especially in the California Corporations Code, which is not a area of law that most police officers, enforce.
Right.
But in financial crimes, there's a lot of tools out there at our disposal and different types of criminal codes that we could use. So called up the Corporations Code office, spoke to one of their attorneys. They agreed with the felony level crimes. I reclassified the information report to a criminal report and started the investigation of this individual.
Interesting. And take us along a little further in the investigation.
Okay, so this individual had a history of doing a lot of scams, mostly in real estate. He preyed on people that couldn't afford to buy homes, and this was around the 2006, 2005 era. Couldn't afford to buy homes, so he would set up these deals that, of course, were too good to be true, but people trusted him anyway because he's a very charismatic person. And he told this elderly lady that he can get her out of a condominium and into a home for her and her family, which she had family members living with her in that small condominium. And so she trusted him, and he would ask for down payments, which she would give him. And several $1,000s later, she finally realized that she wasn't getting a house. So she called the police and made a report, and that's when we got involved.
And she's so fortunate that you picked it up the next day. And I understand that person was ultimately prosecuted and went to prison.
Yes, he did. We did the investigation on him. It was clearly criminal. We set up a time where we had a warrant for his arrest. We arrested him and brought him back for an interrogation. And after several hours of interviewing this individual, he confessed. But with a lot of supporting evidence too. So it wasn't only his confession that got him convicted, but it definitely helped.
Okay, so tell me about the company that you now are in.
So I started a company after leaving law enforcement with my partner, Ben Rose. And so the company is called Carden Rose. And what I did for either the police department or the Office of Special Investigations, assisting agents in doing more thorough, detailed investigations into electronic data and electronic evidence, is something now that we provide to any law firm or corporation that needs those types of services. My partner, Ben Rose, did forensic investigations in the corporate area, and he worked for Kaiser Permanente for several years and did forensics and investigations for them. So with my government experience and his corporate experience, we felt we make it a good team to go out and provide services to attorneys and corporations that need our services.
Can you tell me about any that you've done with regard to estates and trust or wrongdoing associated with estates and trust?
Yes, we actually recently did a very interesting one where there was an elderly gentleman that was pretty reclusive, lived out by himself in a remote area, and didn't get a lot of visitors. And he didn't have a lot of friends. But he passed away, and I think it was about 30 days at least until someone found him. And finally, one of his friends did come by, saw that he was deceased, and ended up reporting it. And then a month after that incident, that same individual handed his attorney the updated will that the deceased failed to give anybody else but his best friend, who also found him, leaving everything to him. What was interesting about that case and what was at the center of it is the deceased actually was very intrigued with Bitcoin when Bitcoin first came out, and he made a lot of purchases in Bitcoin. And as you know, recently with the rise in Bitcoin prices, those thousands of dollars were worth probably in the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions. And so there was definitely a reason why people wanted to be the beneficiary of his will.
Okay. And as I understand it, the fellow was able to do a little self-help and put himself in.
Yeah, so he did, and of course the family fought it, and the family hired us because the deceased had a computer at his home. And so we analyzed the computer, and we also worked with the coroner's office to establish the date of death. And we found that there was no activity on his computer from the date of death until the date he was located by his friend. And also the will was updated and changed at that time after the friend located the
And
body. So
as
it was
far as you knew, the resurrection hadn't occurred.
correct. No evidence of that at all. But it was pretty obvious what happened. But the computer evidence painted a picture of what occurred, and it was pretty clear.
Yeah. The more we're involved in these cases, the more we're always almost amused, but also outraged by activities like that. But I can say, as you can affirm, these types of things just happen all the time.
They do.
And that's why Hackard Law looks to you and your company for assisting us in ferreting out forensic evidence. So I know I'm going to ask you back in the future to tell stories, and you have fabulous stories. People should listen to you, and the stories that mean something as to how to go about seeking justice. So, Jim, I thank you today, and I think our viewers are going to enjoy you. And now I need to do a plug for my book, the book that The Wolf at the Door, Undue Influence and Elder Financial Abuse. It's going to come out in early autumn, and for any of the viewers that would like to have a free copy of the book, they just need to email us at Hackard Law, and when the book comes out, I'll send them a copy. Thank you.
Thank you very much.